here's their biggest problem. At the end of this whole predictable process, they might impeach the president, won't be convicted, then they're going to run on this insanity. They're running against a strong economy. They're running against the president who has an American First agenda that's working with record low unemployment. As a matter of fact, the lowest jobless claim since 1969. Look at this, record number of Americans now employed, a new high in household median income, new low record unemployment for African Americans, record low unemployment Hispanic Americans, Asian Americans, women in the workforce, youth unemployment. We have 3% wage growth. We have energy independence, so much more. So as you watch this impeachment madness this week, you're going to know that that's what they want on the other side of this. Crazed socialists that want to undo all of this success and go back to not only the bad years of Biden-Obama, but even worse than that. They never got the results they wanted in 2016. Mueller never gave them what they wanted. So again, rather than fight for jobs, a strong economy, peace, security, they just obsess over overturning the will of the American people. And everything they now accuse Donald Trump of, it's kind of interesting to watch this boomerang effect that they themselves are guilty of. Russian interference, the dirty Russian dossier, that was Hillary Clinton's. DNC officials colluding with a foreign country, in this case Ukraine. Oh yeah, that would be the Democrats. If you're looking for quid pro quo, just look at Joe Biden. He's Mr. Quid Pro Quo Joe, bragging on tape about firing the prosecutor he knew was investigating his zero experience son Hunter, who was being paid millions of dollars. And he basically says on tape, well, we'll give you the $1 billion if you fire the guy investigating my son. Fire the prosecutor, you get $1 billion. You don't fire him, you don't. Now that's real corruption, that's real collusion, and also a real agenda that would destroy the country, as we've outlined on this show night after night. And get this, even Ocasio-Cortez, she's now trying to defend poor Hunter Biden. By the way, he's not a young kid, he's almost 50 years old. Take a look.
But I do want to ask you, we had some news that broke earlier today. Your Republican colleagues announced that they intend to call on Hunter Biden as a witness in this impeachment probe. Is he an appropriate witness?
No, I don't think he's an appropriate witness. And not only that, but I think that the reason they're calling for these witnesses, these new witnesses, is because they want to make a spectacle and a circus out of this entire proceeding. They want to distract the American people.
We've been asking for months. We are now told, I told you last week, my patients are pretty much shot and frayed, but hopefully it will pay off. The long-delayed Horowitz FISA abuse report we're now hearing could be as early as 1 week from today. They're telling me, my sources, the findings in it will shock the conscience. Time will tell. In other words, premeditated fraud against the FISA court, exculpatory evidence purposely withheld, circular reporting to deceptively bolster their warrants and their lies in the FISA, their unverified so-called evidence that they put in there, the bulk of evidence that they present to the FISA court, materials showing that James Comey's FBI knew that Steele's dirty dossier was never verified. It was unverifiable garbage, but they used it anyway. And according to a brand new report from Sarah Carter tonight, criminal referrals, she believes, are likely. And joining us now with the details, Fox News contributor Sarah Carter. We were told we were going to get this back in May from the Attorney General. Why so long?
Well, it's been a long time coming, Sean, and the main reason is, remember, there's been ongoing investigations. While Horowitz was conducting his report, it is believed that evidence that he stumbled on led Attorney General William Barr basically to appoint John Durham, that's the prosecutor from Connecticut, to continue the investigation and expand the investigation. And now we know it's a criminal investigation, and that Durham, who's conducting his own separate investigation, can now impanel a grand jury. He can can subpoena witnesses. This is very important and very significant because this was at the same time that IG Michael Horowitz, behind the scenes, was conducting his own investigation into the beginning of the FBI's probe into President Trump and the now debunked theory that there was collusion with Russia. What's going to be so important about this report when it comes out, and I have been told that the possibility of it coming out before Thanksgiving is very likely, is that there more than likely will be criminal referrals associated with the report, Sean. And that could be several criminal referrals. Another thing that's very important is we've been waiting forever just to get our hands or to be able to see. I know the American public's been looking forward to seeing those documents that President Trump gave to William Barr to declassify. Well, more than likely, those documents were used in this report. And remember, this report is going to be declassified. To the most part, very little will be redacted in Horowitz's report. So this is another significant development. That means that the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act warrant, those 2 pages that we've been looking forward to seeing, as well as other documents, emails possibly between James Comey and others in the Justice Department that will reveal that exculpatory evidence was withheld, are going to be revealed to the public very soon.
All right, Sarah Carter, thank you for that update and report. Congressman Chaffetz, I got to be honest, this is taking way too long. Michael Horowitz has over 600 people. We have been promised this again and again and again. There's no other conclusion based on what we know than there was premeditated fraud committed on a FISA court. Because it says verified on the top of a FISA application, we know now that it was unverifiable based on the Steele dossier, as the Grassley-Graham memo says. Why so long, and will it be what Sarah just said?
I think Sarah is absolutely right. I don't think you can justify it going on this long. I think anything past Thanksgiving is highly suspicious. I do think that originally there was an anticipation that as much as 20% of the report would be redacted. Now the anticipation is that it would be sentences and paragraphs, not nearly the 20% that originally people thought. And I also think it's going to now envelope in people outside the Department of Justice, people like John Brennan and others, into other agencies, and I think that will be, as we look back, the reason why it took months and months longer, because this tangled web was much further and deeper than just the people at the Department of Justice. And I also think it will show how they manipulated and used the media here in the United States to move forward a political agenda at those at the top of the FBI.
And Congressman Andy Biggs, we really don't have any ambiguity here, because we already know the bulk of information in those applications. 3 of them signed by Jim Comey, 3 of them, was based on unverifiable material. We also know that everybody was warned that, number one, Steele had an anti-Trump bias, that Hillary paid for it, and they were all warned it wasn't verified. So there really is no other possible conclusion. So then the next question is, do you see crimes here, and who would you expect should, now that I guess Durham has, this is a criminal investigation, the right to subpoena, convene grand juries and press charges, who would you expect might be facing that in the near future?
Well, I'm concerned for people like McCabe, Comey, even Rod Rosenstein, anybody who signed off, Sally Yates, anybody who signed off on one of those FISA warrant applications. I'm concerned that I'm not really concerned. I believe that they're culpable in some way. I also believe that their sources are culpable, anybody who suppressed information. But, part of this, Sean, is, and the reason that I think this got delayed so very much is, remember when Horowitz did the last report he did, which gave us people like McCabe, Strzok, and Page, he kept getting whistleblower information at the last minute. So we've been promised this report for literally months, which tells me that he had to broaden the scope of his investigation, and I think there's going to be a world of people, perhaps even Brennan, perhaps even Clapper. The highest levels of the intelligence community, I think, are potentially culpable here.
All right, thank you both for that report. We appreciate it. Rush Limbaugh has a bold, likely correct prediction about how this impeachment hearing week will go. Take a look.
In the impeachment hearings this week, we'll have some analysis, commentary about that. I really think that the model for what's going to happen this week is the Kavanaugh hearings. It was a never-ending parade for about a week and a half. As every person they brought forth to try to destroy Kavanaugh failed, there was another one waiting in the wings. And I will guarantee you that it is the same strategy they're going to employ here this week, getting started with public impeachment hearings.
Here with reaction, ranking member of the House Intel Committee, Congressman Devin Nunes, and the author of Witch Hunt, Fox News legal analyst Greg Jarrett. We already know that the process is flawed because at the end of the day, Congressman, is it true or not true? Adam Schiff, who's compromised in this case, he gets to deny the witnesses you call. He gets to make the final decision on everything, doesn't he? So there are no rights for the ranking members of the president and his attorneys.
Well, as you know, nobody likes to disagree with Rush Limbaugh, but I think in this case, Rush Limbaugh only has it about half right. At least during the Kavanaugh hearings, the Republicans had the ability to bring up people who were supporting Kavanaugh. We don't even have that. So Adam Schiff and his team, whoever, met with the whistleblower. We've had no access to the whistleblower. Number two, we want to know what was the DNC's involvement and the Clinton campaign's involvement in Ukraine, and why did the Ukrainians interfere in our election? We also have out there the situation with Hunter Biden. How did he get $80-some thousand a month? These are just basic questions that we deserve to have the answer to before any of this circus is set to begin on Wednesday. We should have those answers.
Now, you have a list of people, including Adam Schiff, the whistleblower, Nellie Orr, Hunter Biden, Joe Biden. Will any of your witnesses be allowed to testify?
Yeah, as of right now, we have none of our witnesses, right? So, I mean, look, we even put on Ambassador Volker. Okay, this guy was the Democrats' first witness. Came in, it didn't go very well for them. You've all seen the transcripts. He came in voluntarily. The transcripts are out. Why on earth would Volker not be there? He was the special envoy to Ukraine. We're having the top people at the State Department who handled Ukraine, and now the acting ambassador that's coming in on Wednesday. Why would you not have Volker on the same panel? Why would you not give the Republicans a witness? So as of right now, we have no witnesses, and we have no knowledge of the foundation of this case and of these accusations.
But, fundamentally, like everything else, and you outline this in both your books, Greg Jarrett, everything boomerangs back. The only Russian interference we know was the dossier. Right? I mean, it's a little ironic. Now, Ukraine election interference, I thought that would matter. That's the Democrats. And the only quid pro quo is Hunter Biden. You get the $1 billion if you fire the guy investigating my son. You don't get the $1 billion otherwise.
If this were an equitable process, both sides would be able to call their own witnesses. But Adam Schiff won't allow it. He can only and will only allow witnesses that he likes. Reminds me of the old Henry Ford quote, "Any customer can have a car painted any color as long as it's black." Look at the first two witnesses that will be called on Wednesday, Bill Taylor and George Kent. They admit they have no direct knowledge of a quid pro quo. Instead, they heard it from a guy who heard it from a guy who heard it from an original guy. And in both cases, it's diplomat Gordon Sondland. Sondland admits he has no direct knowledge of a quid pro quo. Instead, he testified he presumed it. So this is opinion built on hearsay, constructed on speculation and conjecture.
Now, the Senate, Congressman Nunes, they would have the ability to call all of these witnesses. Lindsey Graham said that this is dead on arrival without the whistleblower, and he wants Hunter Biden to testify. Tell us what the Senate can do, and what would you recommend they do?
Well, let's see how this goes this week. My guess is it's going to be a complete circus. We're not going to get any of our witnesses. The mainstream media is going to say how damaging it is to the president. That's just going to be the storyline. But the fact of the matter is, if you actually read these transcripts, and Greg Jarrett was just going through them, Byron York has a piece out tonight talking about Vindman, their star witness. These transcripts, as we were saying, when the Democrats were slowly leaking these out to the friends in the media, that's what we've been doing for the last 6 weeks. But now that the transcripts are out, they're devastating to the Democrats. So let's see where it goes. But at the end of the day, the Senate should be calling all these people in as soon as possible.
Okay, I hope the Senate's listening. They've got to do their job now. Consider any impeachment in the House that doesn't allow us to know who the whistleblower is to be invalid, because without the whistleblower complaint, we wouldn't be talking about any of this. This is not about Schiff finding the truth. This is about Schiff trying to destroy the Trump presidency.
And a way to set the tone for the GOP ahead of the first impeachment hearing, the public inquiry, of course, this week on Capitol Hill. The Republicans need to be on offense as well with their messaging. First, the GOP needs to ask Democrats what crime they're actually trying to prove. And second, what are Dems trying to hide by denying Republicans the ability to call their own witnesses, unfettered ability? Joining me now, Alan Dershowitz, Harvard Law Professor Emeritus, author of the new book, Guilt by Accusation, and Bob Barr, former Clinton impeachment manager, former Georgia congressman. Alan, what other questions should Republicans be asking?
Well, the first question really is, what are the impeachable offenses that you're looking into? So far, the Democrats have invented 4 non-existent crimes. Obstruction of Congress, it doesn't exist. I mean, members of the executive are entitled to refuse to comply with subpoenas if they have legitimate privilege claims, and that's why we have a system of checks and balances. Those issues get resolved by the judiciary. Member collusion, that wasn't a crime. Exposing a whistleblower, that's not a crime. Having a conversation with the president of the Ukraine, that's not a crime. So far, we have no crimes, no high crimes, no misdemeanors, no treason, no bribery. And when you're involved in a trial, the first thing you do as a defense attorney is you demand that the prosecution disclose what they're looking for. And the Democrats have no answers. They've made it all up.
The media was pretty transparent, Bob, on why Democrats wanted to call certain witnesses to publicly testify. Watch.
The one thing that will break through, I think, is if this can be dramatized so that our diplomats struggling against the president feel like soldiers in a battlefield and their commander abandoned them.
I'm told from Democratic aides that they wanted Taylor to be there because he's a Vietnam vet, and they wanted Marie Yovanovitch there because I'm told she cried in her testimony, and they essentially want someone who's going to be emotional to say, I was a victim of the president trying to do this for his own political gain.
These people are sick.
Bob, would any of that, it was like made-for-TV drama, like, one of those old TV specials, have any effect on the ultimate outcome?
Yeah, it's worse than the old soap operas, on Tuesday afternoon.
Yeah.
The crying and the wringing of the hands and the suspense over whose child is whose parent and so forth.
Yeah.
You can't even watch this, much less say it with a straight face, Laura. It is absolute nonsense, and it would be funny, but for the fact that what they are doing is they are undermining the single most important, unique factor of our constitutional republic, and that is the ability of the citizenry to remove the elected leader of our country for good reason.
I mean, when you talked, Alan, on this show a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking about how dangerous this is as a historical moment in our country, when the party out of power, after having a couple of opportunities, they thought, to keep him from winning presidency and then knocking him out with Mueller, failing on both counts, now trying again to go around the will of the voters. What kind of precedent does this set going forward?
It says that Congress is above the law, and Congress is not above the law. The framers of the Constitution had a great debate, and they rejected impeachment on the ground of maladministration, and they're trying to redo that. They're trying to go back and undo the debate that resulted in the constitutional criteria, and it's extremely dangerous. And when you allow Congress to make up crimes, that means any of us could be the victim of a made-up crime. In my book, Guilt by Accusation, I talk about how people make up facts and make up stories, but it's even worse when you make up crimes and when you make them up against a duly elected president. And so I think that every American should be concerned about the impact of what the Democrats are doing on civil liberties.
Yeah, I mean,
and I'm speaking as a Democrat.
I just got hot under the collar with our Democrat guest, who I like Richard Goodstein a lot, but he's just started throwing out the president's guilty of extortion, bribery. I'm like, whoa, you can't just throw these things around. These are very damaging terms. No one's been charged with anything. And Bob, today Democrats released the transcript for Laura Cooper's testimony. She's the Pentagon's top official on Russia. Here's one revelation I think that's being ignored. Former Ukraine Ambassador Kurt Volker sought a statement that the government of Ukraine would make that would somehow disavow any interference in U.S. elections and would commit to the prosecution of any individuals involved in election interference. So, Bob, is there something bad about that?
Well, one would have thought, Laura, before this full impeachment got started, that would be precisely what the Democrats would be cheering, to get to the bottom of foreign interference and to make sure that foreign leaders mixed up in corruption and interfering in our election actually were held accountable. Yet, rather than say, thank you, Mr. Trump, for having on your team some people who want to do this, and for you yourself standing up for America against foreign corruption, they're now trying to impeach the guy. You just can't win for trying.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for being here tonight. We really appreciate it. And also, over the weekend, House Republicans submitted a list of people that they'd like to testify publicly at these impeachment hearings. It's comprised of 8 names, including the whistleblower and Hunter Biden. But 3 others also stand out. Joining me now is Lee Smith, investigative journalist and author of the huge bestseller, The Plot Against the President. Lee, I want to start with Devin Archer. Who is he and why is he important?
Yes, he was Hunter Biden's business partner, and he and Mr. Biden went and they joined Burisma in 2014. So I believe that they would like to interview him and ask what was going on at Burisma. I will say it's interesting to note that they had another partner as well, Christopher Hines, who's the stepson of former Secretary of State Kerry. It appears that Mr. Hines knew better. This was part of the reason for him stopping doing business with them, because obviously walking into a situation like that, a government unfortunately typically historically plagued by corruption, he knew better than to get involved with that. Hunter Biden, it appears, did not.
The next person I want to get to now is Nellie Orr, contractor at Fusion GPS that commissioned the Steele dossier. She's also married to DOJ official who has paw prints all over this Russia deal, Bruce Orr. Lee, though, why is it important for Nellie Orr to be part of this inquiry? This is getting really thick in the weeds here, but interesting.
Right, because Nellie Orr is one of 2 DNC contractors. She worked for Fusion GPS, so the Clinton campaign hired her through Fusion GPS, and she testified before Congress that that her organization had a Ukrainian source, a man named Sergei Lyshenko, who was providing them information regarding the Trump-Russia operation they ran against the Trump campaign.
So, hence the concern that Ukraine had some type, we don't know exactly what, involvement in rolling out this whole Russia.
Absolutely. They're afraid, the Democrats are quite concerned that this would be exposed, and we'd certainly want to know to what extent Ukrainian officials volunteered this or to what extent they were dragged in by the Democrats.
And finally, there's Alexandra Chalupa. She's a contractor hired by the DNC during the 2016 election who coordinated with the Ukrainians to investigate President Trump and Paul Manafort. Now, according to visitor logs, she visited the White House 27 times during that time. Lee, if she does testify, what can Republicans expect to ask her?
Well, I mean, they should certainly ask her about going to the Ukrainian embassy here in Washington, D.C., and asking the ambassador and other Ukrainian officials to help the Clinton campaign in 2016. So it's the same thing. Both her and Nellie Orr are DNC operatives who were working with different Ukrainian officials to gather dirt on the Trump campaign.
Now, what I find really disturbing looking down the road is that this is, even though it's out in public, there's still very limited rights for the Republicans. They can call witnesses. Probably most of them won't be allowed. They can question until they're shut down, and then in the Senate trial, we'll see who does the questioning for the president, for the administration. Should be White House counsel, who's a really good litigator. I hope it's he. But I don't think they're going to get any sense of fairness in this process.
No, certainly not. What's even more bizarre is that these facts are known, both about Nellie Ohr and Alexandra Chalupa, because a lot of this information, well, it comes from John Solomon's great reporting, also a Politico article in 2017. We saw at the end of last week, Politico is basically trying to bury the article they've done. They're trying to make these facts disappear.
This is the New York Times, Washington Post, Politico, all these, they've become aggressively incurious.
I gotta come over and see the fake news. Let's go.
Jeff Zucker runs a television network, CNN, but he doesn't actually go on television. He spends most of his time up in his lair screaming into the speakerphone at his various minions, one of whom, the creepiest of all the minions, when Jeff Zucker has something to say, slithers forth and speaks for him like a ventriloquist dummy. So when he speaks, you know it's actually Zucker talking. And when he doesn't speak, you know it's because Zucker told him not to. And despite the fact that this kid is supposedly a media critic, one story he's assiduously ignored is the greatest media story of the month/year, and that's ABC News anchor Amy Robach's claim that her network killed reporting on billionaire pedophile Jeffrey Epstein. That's a great story. So why is CNN covering for Epstein and his allies in the media and refusing to bring news of that story to its viewers? Chadwick Moore is a journalist based in New York. He's kicked around the journalist business for long enough to know things, as we say, and he joins us tonight. Great to see you, Chadwick. So why would CNN, why would Jeff Zucker be covering up for ABC, which was covering up for Jeffrey Epstein? I'm confused.
Well, what are do they think that the American people are stupid? Do they think that there are people in this world? They do. And they think there are people in this world who only get their news from CNN, that they don't know what's going on. I hate to break it to Jeff Zucker, but people don't live in airports, okay? They know what's going on. Your silence is deafening. And I think that you mentioned the word cartel, and I think that's right. You know, when I've been on this show before talking about when the media covers for their own, whenever some scandal is broken or there's someone in some hot water, which is increasingly basically every single day. And, they used to sort of circle the wagons and protect their own. I don't think that analogy works so much anymore. I think it's a little too cutesy. This isn't the Oregon Trail. This is Juarez, and Jeff Zucker is El Chapo.
These people are sick.
I mean, the level of corruption here is insane, and these are supposed to be competitors. We would assume that the news business would want to, maybe be delighting in one of their competitors having a tough time.
No, but it's bigger than that, because it does tell you, so CNN is liberal, obviously. They've identified their audience as liberal, and people stuck in airports, as you noted. I get all that's totally fine. But the Epstein story isn't political necessarily, so it really reveals the deeper agenda, which is basically covering up for the people in charge, however repulsive, corrupt, and criminal they are. I mean, that's really what it is, right?
That's exactly right. The fact that they said this story was squashed because they wanted an interview with Will and Kate for the 10,000 housewives that care about the royal family? I mean, and instead it's just powerful people, powerful, well-connected people, and you're right to point out it wasn't necessarily political. And that is what makes it so disgusting and so corrupt.
So, but you've been in journalism a long time. Is that what journalists are supposed to do? Cover up and protect powerful people?
Of course not. I always thought that journalists are supposed to expose powerful and expose corruption and speak up, like I did several years ago and was blacklisted by liberal media when I saw things very, very bad behavior. And now what we're seeing is with Amy Robach being so obsessed with not the corruption, not the injustice, not that many people were probably continue to get victimized after the story was spiked, but she's obsessed with the fact that she didn't get credit for breaking the story, this career-defining story that she wanted her name on, and it fulfills this impression people have of journalists as these spineless egomaniacs who don't care about anything but themselves and working their way, climbing up the ranks. Now at ABC, it worked for her. She became a co-anchor of 2020 after she shut up and didn't fight this, so that's a very prestigious job.
You're absolutely, I defended Amy Robach on the show until I read your piece in The Spectator. You've been running for them recently and I think doing an amazing job. And you won me over to your point of view. You're absolutely right. I mean, she should have spoken up, right? Of course.
At least called the police, you know?
Yeah, no, you're right. You're totally
Yeah.
right. Chadwick Moore, great to see you tonight.